Hello, I am Cherie, Yanek, Churchill Librarian. Today we are going to read Hedy Lamarr's Double Life, Hollywood Legend and Brilliant Inventor. This is written by Laurie and illustrated by Katy. I think you'll find this story fascinating, as I definitely did. Actor, dazzling looks, famous face, many fans, adored, stylist, glamorous. Inventor, reference books, workshop space, secret plans, ignored, scientists curious. Who was the real Hedy Lamarr? Hedy Lamarr's Double Life. Hedy Lamarr led a double life. The public knew her as a glamorous movie star, famous throughout the world. But in private, Hedy was a brilliant inventor, a fact known only to her closest friends. Hedy's greatest invention was the technology known as the frequency hopping spread spectrum. Wow. This is the scientific breakthrough that helps keep our cell phone messages private and defends our computers from hackers. Without Hedy's revolutionary idea, the electronic devices we use every day would be more open to attack. Cameras flashed. The glamorous movie star stepped out of her limousine and onto the red carpet. Everyone who was anyone in Hollywood was there. The star-studded premiere of her first English-language movie, Algiers, was the social event of 1938. Journalists and photographers crowded around her, if they only knew the story, the true story behind the world's most beautiful woman. And there's a quote from her here. It says, "People seem to think that because I have a pretty face, I'm stupid. I have to work twice as hard as anyone else to convince people I have something resembling a brain." Wow, pretty fierce. The Hollywood legend had no interest in a glitzy lifestyle. Her passion was science and engineering. Hedy converted her fancy parlor into an inventor's workshop, complete with tools, a drafting table, and many well-thumbed technical books. After long days of acting, Hedy hurried home to work on her latest invention. Her brain overflowed with idea after idea for useful inventions. Though Hedy never tried to sell any of these inventions, that didn't stop her from working to make her designs the best they could be. And she says, "Inventions came easy for me to do. I suppose I just came from a different place." Here are some of her inventions. Thirsty travelers? Hedy made a flavor cube that changed plain water into soda. A device to help people in and out of the bathtub. An accordion fold pocket on tissue boxes. Hedy intended them to hold used tissues. Pretty clever. Lost pets? She designed a glow-in-the-dark dog collar. A new traffic signal. It would indicate when the light was about to change. Even as a child in Austria in the early 1920s, Hedy's curious mind wanted to know how things worked. What powered automobiles? Which type of motor worked best in an airplane? How could she improve a machine's design? At age 5, Hedy took apart her music box to examine the mechanism. Hedy's father shared her love of science and technology. During their walks around their hometown of Vienna, they exchanged ideas about everything and anything, from streetcars to printing presses, and even the constellations that dotted the night sky. Hedy wanted to understand the science and technology behind them all. And here is a quote. "My father had encouraged me by telling me to hold fast to my dream, and that if I held fast, it would come true." Young Hedy was also crazy about motion pictures. Whenever possible, she sneaked off to a movie theater. Returning home, Hedy reenacted her favorite scenes, playing all the parts herself. She constructed a stage for her dolls underneath her father's desk. There she performed shows for imaginary audiences. Her dolls starred as fairy tale heroes and villains. For real audiences, Hedy acted in school plays and sang at music festivals. Always dreaming, Hedy wanted to escape to the movies. Soon she got her chance. "All my life I had loved to play, act, and pretend." Hedy's first job was script girl at the movie studio in Vienna. When the opportunity came up to be an extra in a movie, Hedy rushed to apply. She won a minor role in a restaurant scene. This bit part, small as it was, gave Hedy her first steps on the road to stardom. Hedy constantly practiced her acting skills. She imitated family, friends, and even people she saw on the street. She mimicked the way people walked and talked. She copied their mannerisms and facial expressions. "I acted all the time. I was a little living copybook. I wrote people down on me." Wow. Before long, Hedy was cast as the lead in a play. She caught the eye of a very famous Hollywood producer, Louis B. Mayer. Impressed by her talent, he offered her a 7-year movie contract. Hedy left her family behind in Europe and moved to America. After only 6 months of English lessons, she starred in her first American movie. Mayer thought a glamorous star needed a Hollywood name, so Hedwig Eva Maria Kaiser became Hedy Lamarr. She said, "My face has been my misfortune, a mask I cannot remove. I must live with it. I curse it." Wow, it's pretty intense. And this movie poster said, "Strange loves hiding in the Casbah city of secrets." Probably fascinating. Hedy went on to star in many well-loved films, including the biblical drama Samson and Delilah and the comedy My Favorite Spy. She acted with some of the most famous movie stars of the time, people like Angela Lansbury, Jimmy Stewart, Judy Garland, and Clark Gable. Hedy was now a major movie star. She says, "The brains of people are more interesting than looks, I think." I agree. Hedy's movie let people escape the talk of war, if only for a few hours. World War II was raging and everyone was afraid. Nazis had taken over Germany and Nazi soldiers had invaded many other European countries. At a friend's dinner party, Hedy met George Anti, a composer of modern music. She learned he was also a former weapons inspector. This reminded Hedy of a discussion she'd overheard back in Europe about a problem with the guidance system for torpedoes. The guidance system couldn't prevent the enemy from jamming the weapon's radio signals. Because of this, the enemy could command a torpedo to go off course. That would be disastrous. Hedy asked George if the United States Navy faced a similar problem with their torpedoes. They did. She said, "Hope and curiosity about the future seem better than guarantees. That's the way I was." That's a good attitude. The two inventors decided to combine their talents and figure out a solution to the problem. During breaks from inventing, they challenged each other with games on the piano. George's hand hopped quickly from piano key to piano key. Hedy's hand flew across the keyboard, matching him note for note in a different octave. With every different key she pressed, a piano wire quickly moved back and forth. The speed of the wire's movement, or its frequency, produced the correct note for that key. "Hey, look, we're talking to each other, and we're changing all the time." Hedy realized that even though the notes were constantly changing, she and George could still play at the same time. All she had to do was match the note's frequency. That gave her an idea. The idea to build a secure torpedo guidance system. In the early 1940s, these guidance systems worked like a walkie-talkie, a two-way radio. In order for walkie-talkies to communicate, both handsets must be tuned to the same frequency. Like strings in a piano, radio waves between pairs of walkie-talkies have unique frequencies. A pair of walkie-talkies can only communicate when they're set to the same frequency. Torpedo guidance systems used to work like that. The equipment on a ship launching a torpedo and the torpedo itself needed to be set to the same frequency. If the enemy figured out what that frequency was, they could cause trouble. Hedy proposed an improved system, one that worked if it contained several pairs of walkie-talkies. Each pair would be set to a unique frequency. From moment to moment, the system could switch which pair of walkie-talkies carry the message. The idea just came to me. I never thought of such a thing before and probably never shall again. Hedy's system didn't actually contain numerous walkie-talkies. Instead, it used a single device that could quickly change frequencies. As long as the device on the ship and the one on the torpedo were tuned to the same frequency at the same time, they could communicate. Hedy called her discovery the hopping of frequencies. Hedy and George spent night after night brainstorming ways to implement her idea. Frequency hopping was the most important part of the guidance system they developed. Even if the enemy managed to overhear part of a message, it didn't matter. The device had already hopped to a new frequency. Unless the enemy knew the frequency being used at an exact moment, they couldn't interfere with the message. Wow, pretty complex. I expanded the basics of the idea, and the implementation part came from George. Hedy and George added another security feature to their system. It broke messages into pieces and sent them into short bursts. These were so short the enemy might not even realize that a message had been sent. Hedy and George shared their idea with the National Inventors Council, the group that evaluated discoveries for possible military use. The council told them that their idea had great potential value and was red hot. All creative people want to do the unexpected. Their system still needed to be automated so it could work without a human at the controls. There had to be a way of making sure both devices used the same frequency at the same time. Without this, the system would be useless. Hedy remembered that George had once arranged for 16-player pianos to play at the same time. Moving rolls of paper with holes punched in them told the pianos which notes to play and when. In Hedy and George's invention, matching rolls of ribbon on the ship and the torpedo controlled the system. The hole signaled which frequency the system should use at that time. That allowed the transmitter and receiver to change frequencies simultaneously. Wow, pretty complex, right? Improving things comes naturally to me. That's a fascinating idea. After months and months of hard work, Hedy and George finished their secret communication system. They wrote a detailed description of the design and filled out an application for a patent. If the patent was approved, no one could steal Hedy and George's idea. They sent their patent application to the government. Then they waited and waited and waited. Do good anyway, think big anyway, build anyway. More than a year later, on August 11th, 1942, they received their patent. Frequency hopping, their technology-changing invention, was ready to share with the world. They immediately handed both the idea and the patent to the United States Navy. Hedy was proud her frequency hopping idea might help America win the war. We were now at war, and a terrible time it was. Ultimately, the Navy had neither the time nor the money to implement a new system during wartime. They refused to develop Hedy and George's invention. Even worse, they classified the technology as secret. This prevented anyone, including the inventors, from using it. Wow. Hedy looked for another way to help her adopted country defeat the hated Nazis. She realized she could use her celebrity to raise money by selling war bonds. Hedy traveled cross-country and held sales rallies. She sold $25 million worth of war bonds. She says, "I'm here to help win the war." Hedy also volunteered at the Hollywood Canteen, a club for American servicemen soon to be sent into battle. To lift their spirits, she chatted and danced with them. By the end of each evening, her feet were sore, but she was happy to have helped the soldiers and sailors. No matter the job that needed to be done, the famous movie star was first in line to lend a hand. She even washed dishes. Friday nights at the canteen became Hedy Lamarr night. When Hedy wasn't busy volunteering or acting, she continued to tinker in her inventor's workshop. More than 20 movies later, Hedy retired from acting. 40 years later, the military finally declassified Hedy's frequency hopping technology. Finally. The patent had long since expired, so anyone was now free to use this invention. They didn't need to give Hedy or George the credit for their amazing discovery. Companies raced to include frequency hopping in their own devices. This technology can be found inside many of today's most popular electronics. I can't understand why there's no acknowledgement when it's used all over the world. Never a letter, never a thank you, never money. Frequency hopping spread spectrum is a technology that helps keep cell phone calls and texts private. It's a trick that allows secure wireless communications between computers and the internet, and it makes it harder for people to hack drone aircraft. All this was made possible by Hedy's idea, the hopping of frequencies. She says, "My life was full of colors, full of life. I don't regret anything. I learned a lot." It wasn't until more than 50 years after their patent was granted that the world recognized the contributions of Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil. In 1997, the inventors received the Pioneer Award from Electronic Frontier Foundation for their significant contribution to computers. Hedy's response to this great honor? It's about time. So I hope you enjoyed the story of Hedy Lamarr's double life. It's always interesting to learn about actors and actresses who have passions and really amazing contributions to our world. Thanks for listening, and keep on reading.